Hi everybody, welcome to a tactics video. This time how to use the glorious Kasrkin, the Cadian Elite, also known as the Kin. A fantastic unit, which is certainly one of the more meta choices in Astra Militarum for 40k 10th edition as at August 2025. Just like the previous videos I've done, how to actually use the unit, I'll look at what they can't do, their negatives, what they can do, their positives, effective use, and also some discussion about optimal configurations. So if you're new to my channel, I cover everything Astra Militarum from the hobby aspect, including kit bashing and painting, lore videos, and also tactics videos where I focus on actually how to use units as opposed to what they are in inverted commas. So let's look very quickly at their datasheet if you're not familiar. If you are, skip forward a few minutes. But they're fieldable in squads of 10. They've got a standard sort of Astra Militarum human profile here, 6-inch move, toughness 3, 4+ save. Yeah, 4+, not 5+, 1 wound, leadership 7, OC 1. So they're still relatively squishy, albeit a 4+ save, same as the Tempested Scions. Now, war gear wise, the way to basically summarize it is the Sergeant can take plasma pistol, or a bolt pistol or las gun, a chain sword, or a power sword, power weapon. So you should just take a plasma pistol and a power weapon, because they're the best. And then basically you've got 4 special weapon dudes, so you can take 2 plasma gunners, 2 melter gunners, which are typical configuration, or you can take a grenade launcher, hot shot volley gun if you wish, but you can take 4 of those, so 2 of each, so 2 plasma gun, 2 melter, or 2 hot shot volley gun, 2 grenade launcher. Then you can take one guy's got the marksmanship rifle, which you see here. It's actually quite a tasty sniper rifle at 4.23, so will one-shot most low-level characters. And then finally, you can take a melter mine dude who comes with the melter mine, which is like a big saucepan. It's this dude down here with a big melter saucepan and a las pistol. So remember, what it basically means is that of your squad of 10, you've got sniper rifle, sergeant, 2 plasma guns, if you're taking that, 2 melter guns, if you're taking that, the melter mine man, and then you've got 3 dudes who've got hotshot las guns. So remember, hotshot las guns are pretty decent, well, not too bad. Strength 3, AP 1, 1 damage. Here we go there. And obviously the hotshot las pistol is strength 3, AP 1, also 1 damage as well. So quite a bit of DACA in this squad. I think you've got essentially 3 plasma dudes with a plasma pistol, 2 melters, sniper rifle, and a melter mine as well. So then their abilities, they can scout 6, which is fantastic. Then got the Warrior Elite ability, which is once per battle round, start of any phase, you can issue an order to this unit until the extent of your next command phase. It applies, and this is also in addition to any other orders they've received in that battle round. So the key one to look out for is once per battle round at the start of any phase. So it could be your opponent's phase or your phase. That's quite important to remember as a bit of an opportunity to play around with things. Then they can also take a Voxcaster. Great, so if you're not taking Lord Solar or Ursula Creed and you want to sort of get your CP back on a 5+, you can get CP, or a 4+ if you're an officer. Get the CP back, and as I said, the Melter Mine. Now the Melter Mine is once per battle start of any phase at all, yours or your opponent's, within 3 inches on a D6 on a 2-up, they suffer D3 mortal wounds, or 2 D3 if it's a vehicle unit. So again, a very tasty little rule here. The other thing to remember is then their keywords. Their infantry, they've got the grenade keyword for the stratagem. Their regiment, which means they get loads of the detachment rules applied to them, and also obviously got Kasrkin as well. Now who they can be led by is actually quite a few. The Cadian Castellan, Commissar, Lord Solar, Ministorum Priest, Primaris Psyker, Tech Priest Agency, and Ursula Creed. So a lot of options here, to which I will discuss a bit later, but I would broadly say you typically don't attach them to anything else, typically, because they're just not really, you don't really need that to happen. So that's their data sheet. Remember, they're essentially squishy guardsmen with a 4+ save. They can self-order, give themselves an order. They've got loads of DACA. They can scout 6, and they've got a really cool little trick here with the Melter Mine, which is at the beginning of any phase. So coming in at 110 points, there's certainly a very meta choice as at August of 2025. So now let's look at their negatives. And if you've watched previous videos I've done like this for other units, you can check out this playlist here. You actually get the sense this is actually pretty light on actual stuff. I'm really scraping the barrel for negatives for this unit. So one is legitimate to think about is they've got 28.5mm bases, which means over the course of 10 dudes, you've got roughly an extra 1.5 inches of footprint compared to a 10-man squad of Cadians, Def Corps, etc. Now, I'm struggling to find negatives. The only one I can think of is that if you bring it in from reserves, your footprint is 1.5 inches bigger than 10 Cadians, 10 Def Corps, 10 Tempestus Scions. So it does mean you will find it harder to sneak into reserve spots or deep strike spots or reserve spots in your opponent's backfield. But again, I'm sort of struggling for once to say that bad about them. On the positive is then, because they've got a bigger footprint, they can extend further, they can movement block further, they can be closer for orders, etc., because their footprint is bigger. But again, bringing them in from reserves, they're going to take up more space because they're a little bit bigger than, say, Cadian Shock. Now, they're still squishy. 4+ save, 1 wound, toughness 3, leadership 7, means you will fail battle shock some of the time, and you will take mass casualties if anything serious looks at them. Of course, there are ways to make them less squishy. Take cover, the recon element detachment, put them in cover, but that applies to all other Astra Militarum infantry. You can make all of them more survivable through orders, stratagems, detachments, etc. So they're still squishy. Now, 110 points, they actually feel very well costed, but they're not cheap enough to throw away. So what I mean by that is if they're at 65 points or 55 points for a Scout Sentinel, it's the type of unit you just flick at your opponent and go, there you go, enjoy that for an activation. Now, that being said, you shouldn't be sort of thinking about this unit as one you throw away. As I'm saying here, you should be really thinking carefully how they can be used effectively. And that also applies to a degree, is that, you probably don't want to be using this unit to perform actions unless you have to, unless they're not going to do anything that turn anyway. But if you find this unit is just performing actions for you, you've missed a trick. And likewise, if you find them dying really early for no gain, you're also not using them correctly as well, in inverted commas correctly. They also suck in melee, like most guard units, worth saying. And they're not guaranteed to kill vehicles and monsters. So they can definitely trade up. They can definitely trade up and kill pretty nasty things. But remember, into serious vehicles, which are toughness 10 or higher, or even toughness 9 or higher, it means, excluding some detachments, that your melters are wounding on 4s, if not 5s, and your plasmas are wounding most of the time on 5s. So sure, your melter mine could do a load of mortal wounds. You can get lucky with your melters. You've only got 2 melter shots, but you're not guaranteed to kill vehicles and monsters. You will definitely kill infantry, as we'll just talk about in a second, but don't be fooled into thinking they're going to delete like a tank, for example, because they're not guaranteed to, because they're wounding typically on 4s, if not 5s, and that is not great math. So another negative is that you're going to take squads. You're going to take 3 squads. They're not battle lines. You're going to take 3, and that's again my attempt to call it a negative. I wish you could take 4 or 5. And this again is a small one, but being non-battle line, they can't be attached to Imperial agents. So one I wish you could use was Inquisitor Draxus, where she can make a unit lone op 18, because putting her butted up with Kasrkin not only sounds cool, Cadian Elite with an Inquisitor, but also them having lone op 18 would actually be quite helpful, because lone op 18 means you can shoot outside of that range. You've got sniper rifles and plasma guns, so you'll be actually threatening stuff outside of the lone op range, if that makes sense. But again, it's a pretty small negative to call on. So the broad summary of the negatives is that there's not many negatives. Let's look at the positives. So being infantry, they can move freely around the board. So unlike vehicles, which get stuck behind walls, obviously, these guys can move around everywhere. Great. Okay, they have got the Scout 6, which gives them great early flexibility, either by themselves on a dedicated transport to actually be quite aggressive or be quite conservative. They work well in any detachment. Any detachment we've got, I think we've got 7 of them now, or 6. They all work well. They almost work well without a detachment. They're completely fine, but in certain detachments they do even better. But the thing is, just given how well costed they are at the moment, how fairly costed, not well costed, how fairly costed, and how good the actual rules are, they just work well in any detachment. It doesn't matter what you're playing, they're just good. They can operate independently with the self-order. So this is crucial if you come in from reserves, or if they're not within order range of Ursula Creed, of Acadian Castellan, of Gaunt's Ghost, of Lord Solar, they can give themselves a self-order. So that's great. They can, be more effective by themselves. As we discussed, they're very heavily armed, as I said before, so actually they've got more output than 10 scions. Granted, scions get reroll wounds of 1 or 4 rerolls to wound if the opponent's on the objective. But arguably they've got flat out more DACA. They've got, compared to scions, they've got the plasma, the sniper rifle and the melter mine. And given they can self-order, they probably would end up a bit ahead of the Scion 10-man squad at 140 points versus 110. So actually, when you think about their plus the mortal wounds, the melter mine, is that they're probably the most effective infantry unit for doing DACA, for doing damage to your opponent in shooting, is probably the Kasrkin at the moment. So they'll damage pretty much all infantry because they've got the output. The only place they'll come into trouble maybe would be potentially 3 wound heavy armor like custodians, because that means that your melters are, your plasmas are ineffective. You've got, it takes 2 shots to go through them, which means you're wasting a wound, 2 wounds and 2 wounds, obviously. But broadly, I think against all infantry, you'll pretty much damage everything. And you will tickle all vehicles. Yeah, so what I mean by tickle, again, it's a bit of a jokey one, is that the melter mine, given it does 2 D3 mortals into vehicles, you have the chance to do 6, 3, or just 2. And that is great, because mortal wounds just ignore the save, ignore the wound roll, just go straight through, obviously. So you are going to do some damage against vehicles. You can, of course, roll a 1, which I've done loads of times, which means it doesn't go off. But you are going to damage vehicles. As said, are you going to kill vehicles? The answer is you're not guaranteed to. You definitely could. Of course, your 2 melters could hit. They could wound, and then your opponent could fail their saves, and you could blow up a knight, for example. But is it guaranteed to happen? Absolutely not. But that being said, within their data sheet, they can trade up. So trying to be all competitive here is you want to be thinking about 110 points. Could this unit kill something worth 150, 160, 200 points? The answer is yes. They definitely could do that. Now, the melter mine allows for some jank, some minor jank, and we'll speak about that in a second. But being it happens at the beginning of any phase, opponent's or your own phase, that's where the jank can come into, which can be quite nice. And as I said, they're definitely a meta choice. I mean, Guard is not an army which is blowing the doors off the competitive scene. It used to be, not anymore. We're very sort of mid-table, which is completely fine. But those lists that do pop up as winning or doing very well, you always see Kasrkin in there. So if those really great generals are using him, then we should be using him as well, within reason. So that's the negatives and positives. Now let's look at how to actually use them, the effective use of them. So to start off, think of them as a fantastic objective brawler unit. They're the ones that can not only contest, because you can contest through OC, which is definitely the way you should be thinking about Astra Militarum infantry battle line, is not only can, well, Astra Militarum infantry can't do much damage, broadly speaking, but they can turn off objectives via OC, whilst the Kasrkin can also use OC, but also respectable firepower. So they're a great unit. If your opponent's holding the objective with some, I don't know, Primaris Space Marines, these are the boys who send after them, because not only can they out-OC them, but they can blast them off the board with their damage 2 weapons, melters and grenade stratagem, and also obviously the melter mine. Now, where you deploy them, how you deploy them, so deploy them on the board, in a transport, in reserves, it all works well. Just given how strong the data sheet is, doesn't matter where you put them, they're going to do a good job. So don't be too stressed about where you put them. I personally, I'm going to be playing 3 from now on. I'd always have 1 in reserves. Always have 1 in reserves for that sort of like little counter punch. But definitely, we'll speak about in a second, as you can see the next point. But how you use them on the board or on transports is to be discussed. So if they're on the board or in a dedicated transport, deploy them in a position to aggressively scout the 6 inches if you go first. Yeah, so, and I usually would show on a tabletop similar, but I won't. But let's just think that's a terrain piece. And you've got them deployed here. So if you go first, you can scout them 6 to be more aggressive, to move towards an objective, push further out. But if you go second and you don't want to get blasted on the board, you scout them 6 back behind a piece of terrain. Yeah, so that applies both to if they're on foot or in dedicated transport. So always be, when you deploy them, just make sure you measure that if you do scout 6 backwards, they haven't got line of sight from your opponent who can shoot round. Yeah, so always be thinking, how can I use them aggressively early? And this gets on to a point I just talk about. Don't be too aggressive with them, but I mean, you've got Scout 6, you should be using every single rule in the data sheet, so make sure you can either Scout them 6 aggressive or Scout them 6 backwards behind cover to be safe from any nasty shooting. Now, given you've got so many little weapon options in the unit, you need to be precise with model placement. So particularly the melter mine, you want to have it in a position where it can definitely pop that melter mine. So it may not actually be closest to the enemy, because maybe if you take casualties, etc., and your opponent's over there. But what I'm trying to explain is, and also, well, you can read the points here, but I would say the melter mine would be probably the last model to remove if you're taking mass casualties and even pop the melter mine yet. So place the melter mine in a position where it can actually pop the melter mine, be it in your turn or your opponent's turn. Obviously have your special weapons up front, so they can apply their rapid fire plasma guns or their melter 2 ability on the melter guns. But also, you know, if you've got them in cover and you're just holding an objective, for example, just put the las guns out the front, yeah? So put the las guns, maybe the sniper rifle out the front, in the open to take casualties, because you've got 3 las guns, and I'd say probably the sniper rifle isn't as high value as a plasma or melter, but do very carefully pull away the right casualties, yeah? So I think this one will definitely take a bit of situational experience, because you don't want to be removing the melter mine early. You don't want to be removing, say, some plasmas or melters before you remove las guns. So be very precise in where you place individual models, yeah, because this is pretty key. Now with the melter mine, is don't always pop it in the shooting phase. Given it can go off in any phase, if, for example, you've moved them up, you're within 3 of the enemy, let's say it's a vehicle, which is an easy one, you spray them with all your melter and your plasma and your hotshot las guns, and maybe you do kill it. Maybe it explodes from some shots going through, and that means actually you don't have to pop the melter mine. But if you do all your shooting, you throw a grenade as well via the grenade stratagem, you leave the vehicle on, say, 2 wounds, in your fight phase, which is after the shooting phase, that's when you can throw the melter mine. So it's almost not using it unless you have to. Yeah, because maybe you want to use it early, because again, if you've moved up within 3 of the enemy, of your opponent's unit, and you spray them with loads of shooting, and then they actually could pull away unit outside of 3 inches, that means essentially the melter mine might not be able to work, because as they've pulled models away, you're now outside of 3. And remember, it has to be within 3 inches of the model. Let's just double check that, because 3 inches of the bearer. Yes, it's going to be 3 inches of the guy with the saucepan, this bloke here. So you can't do any jank about it being 3 inches with the unit, but it has to be that guy there. So again, this one I think it takes some situational practice, but definitely into a vehicle. That's when you can sort of see how much damage you do before you commit to it. But against a unit which will pull models away, like an infantry unit, for example, probably got to pop it first, then you apply your DACA. But the key point here is just don't always pop it unless you have to, because, you know, all it takes is that the next turn, I don't know, they shoot you, they charge you. And again, given the melter mine goes off at the beginning of any phase, if they charge at the beginning of the fight phase, you could pop it and kill them in their own turn. So do watch out for that. It's situationally quite a good one. Linked to that is then, let's pretend you come in from reserves, you spray loads of rounds into a target, and you can pop a 9-inch charge, or, you know, and you could actually kill a guy or maybe 2 guys with the melter mine. Is do look for chances to charge into combat. Not only from reserves, but definitely, like, I've charged knights with these dudes. So you spray them with loads of rounds from all their weapons, charge them into combat, pop the melter mine, 2d3 mortals. You pop 4 mortal, which is fantastic. Yes, you may get murdered in the fight phase, but again, it's just these incremental cuts of death by 1,000 cuts into big models like that. So the melter mine certainly is one to sort of manage quite nicely. Right, then, when to use them in the game, I found personally is that you probably want to use them in the mid-game. Mid-game, obviously, is going to be turn 3 onwards. Don't chuck them out turn 1 unless you're confident they're going to do loads of damage and actually trade up and shape the course of the game. This is something I'm guilty of, and this is how I suggest to use them. You may have had better experience using them in a different way, but I've typically found them to be quite good. mid-game, like, turn 2, 3, maybe even 3, 4, 5, because you certainly have the output to do that. But that's more of a conceptual one to think about. Now, orders. The ability to receive double orders is clearly fantastic. So, for example, you could move into position onto an objective and issue duty and honor. So that's great. Or you could, for example, be super shooty, get front rate fire, second rate fire, give it to themselves, and they receive take aim from a friendly officer, suddenly hitting on 2s with 7 plasma shots and a load of hot shot lasgun shots. So do make sure they're receiving double orders as often as possible. Now, linked to that is look for opportunities where giving the self order in your opponent's turn, could help. So, for example, if you went second, your opponent went first, and you're sitting on an objective, and at the beginning of your opponent's command phase, when they went to score that objective, you could you could give the order duty and honor. Suddenly you're extra OC, so you go from being OC 10 to OC 20, and you out OC your opponent, you turn off that objective. So this is a great one. It's going to, again, be quite situationally quite narrow, but do look out for it. It's a similar style of use as using in combined regiment or combined arms, whatever it's called. I think it's inspired command. You can issue an order in your opponent's command phase. This is the similar type of thing, yeah. So you could do duty and honor. If you really want to do it, you could do take cover, for example. But again, given it happens in any phase, let's just check this. Start of any phase, yes, you can issue them an order. It means you can do stuff in your opponent's turn. Yeah, so not only could it be duty and honor, as I said, it could be, I don't know, fixed bayonets if you're fighting in combat, etc., etc. Now, if you are bringing them in from reserves, find ways to give them that second order. And this will tie into the other point I've got down here, but if you're coming in from reserves, and you want to actually apply damage, you want to make sure that these guys have got all the rules overlaid over the top of them to make sure that everything is hitting, everything is wounding, to delete whatever you're looking at. And that's going to come for a second order, typically, well, not typically, but often by Ghosts, Gaunt's Ghost, because you can, obviously, these boys come in from reserves, give themselves the order, then Ghosts come in within 6, Gaunt Ghost. He then gives them an extra order. That's a way to make sure they've always got the 2 orders. Now, again, this gets onto kind of linked here, but you want to be supporting them with stratagems. You want to make sure that over the course of all the different detachments we've got now, there are numerous which support infantry, regiment, etc. Is that these are the guys to give stratagems to. So it's going to be, I don't know, sweep and clear. In the transport detachment one, which gives you 4 rerolls to hit and to wound on objectives. It could be some of those in the siege detachment. It could be in combined arms. So this is a unit to make sure that they've got enough rules over the top of the natural abilities that whatever they look at is going to be seriously damaged. So that, as I said, interfaces with giving him a second order with loads of strats on top, or stratagem on top, can mean that whatever they look at will actually die, because they've got the firepower to do that to a lot of things. So let's now look at some optimal ways to configure your army list to use them. So firstly, as I said at the start somewhere, is that it doesn't matter what detachment you're playing, they're great. They're just a very good data sheet. Just thinking about that quickly, is one potential I'm thinking of is that in the siege detachment, given you can use a stratagem on a character unit, you potentially could attach a Cadian Castellan to these guys, and they're a character units. I think they get 4 rerolls to hit then via that stratagem. I think it's Flare Burst is a specific stratagem. But that being said, so taking 1, 2, or 3 squads always works well. I'm personally padding up my 3rd as we speak, and in all the very competitive, the competitive lists that win tournaments or do very well, you often see 3 squads of Kasrkin. So some of the best players using 3 of them clearly means they're a pretty good unit. Now, one classic combination is chucking them in a Taurox, advancing, disembarking, and then they come out and hose loads of DACA, loads of bullets are sprayed everywhere. Now, this interfaces fantastically with the mechanized assault detachment. So when they come out of the transport, they get +1 to wound. So suddenly then, your melters are going to be super tasty, your plasmas will be super tasty. Of course, you've got your melter mine, you've got your grenade keyword, all that type of thing. And also Hammer the Emperor, the way to use it there is given you auto advance 6, you can drive through walls, which is fantastic, is you could put them in quite nasty places for your opponent to suddenly take a load of damage. So the Torx combination is certainly used by a lot of the best players. It allows you to be very aggressive, potentially very early, and to reach out across the board and do a lot of damage. Because remember, given the Torx can get move, it's got 3 inches plus 12 inches is 15 inches. If it's in Hammer of the Emperor, it's +6 then, so that's 15, 21 inch. It's a huge 21-inch threat range. Then the boys get out within 3 inches. Suddenly you've got a projection of a 24-inch threat range across the table, which is absolutely huge in Hammer of the Emperor. Or Mechanized Assault will be, 3 inches less because a 3-inch advance is the average. So this is a very powerful combination. It is a glass cannon because you'll come out, do loads of damage and die, but at 195 points, I think it is, or 185 points for the Taurox and Kasrkin, you've got a way to basically punch a hole in your opponent's list quite quickly. You can also put them in a Chimera. Again, that's fantastic. And it's got firing deck too, so you can have 2 melter guys shooting at the top, which is super cool. And given these are both dedicated transports, it means they can both scout 6. Yeah, very important to remember that. Now, last point is that attaching them to some characters has got some potential, but it does get quite expensive. So as we look at the opportunities you've got here, you've got the Cadian Castellan. Probably is the best one to think about, is given he can give you an order, he then gets sustained hits. Given that he gives you fall back and shoot, and I think it's just fall back and shoot, means actually you can make it quite a spicy little unit, which gets, it's hitting on 2s, front range fire, second range fire. You can fall back and shoot, and it gets sustained hits. It means you're actually going to make it even more tasty than it already is. But then it's going to go to about 175 points. Commissar, yeah, cool, 35 points. That's cute. If you've got a spare, that's fine. Lord Sol Leontis, probably not. Minister and Priest, they suck. Primaris Psyker, it's okay. 4+ invul save is a 4+ invul save. Tech Breeze Engine Seer, it's cool, but doesn't work. Doesn't do anything. And Ursula Creed, maybe, because Ursula could give them 2 orders, plus they give himself an order, because she can give 2 orders to the unit she's attached to, which means you could have 3 orders, which would be amazing. And given she gives you -1 CP cost on the stratagem, means you could actually make it again, you get loads of output, get a free stratagem. So there is potential with Ursula and the Cadian Castellan. Plus it looks cool from a lore point of view, because then it's like there's Ursula's bodyguard or the Cadian Castellan's bodyguard. But broadly speaking, I think most people who use them well don't attach them to characters, because they just don't need to. It doesn't really achieve much. But yeah, so a great unit. A very fairly costed unit, a very good cost for 110 points. Again, they pop up in a lot of sort of top tournament lists. If you've played them enough, they're great. They've got enough output to tickle most things. The Melter Miners have a fantastic little piece there to just sort of chip away at big targets. And given they can self-order, and they respond well to pretty much all the detachments in the current codex and also the index, they're just a great all-round data sheet. So I definitely want to try to go and try to look. Plus they look cool. They're great to paint. They look absolutely fantastic, honestly. And they're just super cool dudes and girls to use. So what do you think? What's your experience using Kasrkin? What tips and hints have you got for me or other players out there? And what do you think of this video? And if you've got any questions about what I've covered, please let me know. Likewise, if you see any mistakes, let me know as well, because I do slip up sometimes. So if you enjoyed this video and want to support me, you can do so with a like, comment, or by subscribing. Joining my Patreon platoon, we get a miniature assigned for the roll call end of each video, or simply becoming a channel member, or just watching the rest of my YouTube videos, shorts, leaving a comment, liking and subscribing, and share with your friends, all that standard YouTube algorithm stuff these days. I've also had some custom dice printed, as you can see here. I've got them available to buy, so just read the description below for how to get in touch with me. Send you a PayPal link, and I'll post them to you anywhere around the world. Super thanks to all my patrons and subscribers. I really appreciate all the support you give me as a YouTube creator. Let's get your bayonet sharp, last guy unoiled. Faith for the Emperor strong. Patreon platoon, sound off. Tank Commander Glenn. Tank Commander Mitchell. Tank Commander Watchdog Van Etten. Lieutenant Burke Nielsen. Lieutenant Smith. Colour Sergeant DuPont. Sergeants Adal, Scott, the Colonel Merrill. Veterans Gibson, Hall, Lundeen, Guardsman Beard, Coquelin, Easingwood, Hills, Lyons, Malik, Nitton, Medicae Rolfe, Tontkin, Conscripts England, Evangun, Goodwin, Honorary Members Balgrim King, Syker Smith, Cyan Gaylard, Aquilon Nassim.